Welcome to this AAI training video to walk through Atomic Automation external dependencies and how AAI can help you visualize these dependencies and the critical path of your workflows. By the end of this video, you will understand how Atomic Automation visualizes external dependencies, as well as how the critical path is displayed from the Atomic Automation web interface. We'll cover the challenges involved in monitoring these workflows from within Atomic Automation and how AAI can help display these same processes in a way that make both the dependencies and the critical path easier to understand. First, let's walk through a fictitious use case to help us understand how these features can work. We have a company, Vunair Airlines, that manages air travel all over the world. They have flights in many geographical areas, such as Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and other countries. They run many of the same processes for each location. For example, sales, advertising, payroll, etc. There are separate Atomic Automation workflows for each geographical area. Although most of these processes are specific to the geographical area, in some cases there are dependencies between them. For example, payroll in red, which runs within a main EMEA workflow, cannot start until all the advertising processes, shown in green for all geographical areas, have completed. Atomic Automation uses a feature called external dependencies to manage these dependencies. We can see the main EMEA workflow here and the payroll process in red, waiting on the advertising processes in green as external dependencies. We can also see the critical path of the main EMEA workflow. Critical path jobs stand out in the foreground, while non-critical path jobs are in the background. However, it is not possible to see the details of those external dependencies that the payroll process is waiting on. This can't be seen without opening up each of those specific advertising workflows. This lack of visibility causes problems for the operations team. There can be delays as they open up multiple workflows and try to understand the dependencies between them. Following the critical path between the multiple workflows is also a challenge. As we will see, AAI job streams can help solve both of these challenges. The AAI web interface makes visualizing the critical path much easier by designating each critical path job with red icons or red execution bars. And red lines between the execution bars indicate dependencies. All these visual aids are visible across workflows, including if external dependencies are involved. Let's go into our training environment and walk through this same use case directly in Atomic Automation and AAI. We will show the challenges involved from the Atomic Automation web interface and then display the same thing in AAI, showing the differences and advantages. Here we are in our Atomic Automation system. Let's take a look at the workflows that depict our use case and the Vunair geographical hubs. We can see a folder structure called Expenses-Windows and subfolders for each of the geographical hubs. Each workflow for each geographical hub is essentially the same. Remember, we have our sales, scheduling, and advertising processes, just to name a few. However, we know that the EMEA workflow is different because it runs the payroll processes. So let's look at that one. We see the external dependencies to the other geographical workflows by looking at the white rectangles with dotted lines. Inside the rectangle, we can see the arrow icon, which indicates an external dependency object type, as well as the XTRNL short name. If we hover over each external dependency and view the object names, We'll see one for each geographical area: the UK, France, and Finland. Now let's head over to the process monitoring perspective. We have created a master workflow which contains all 4 geographical workflows: EMEA, Finland, France, and the UK. This master workflow is managed by a C-period object, and the C-period object is scheduled to run every 2 hours. The master workflow has just started. So let's monitor that and take a closer look at the EMEA workflow. We see the external dependencies have an initial status of waiting for predecessor. Once the workflow gets to these processes, it will verify that the external dependencies in the other workflows have completed. If they haven't all completed, the workflow will wait with the status of waiting on external dependency. Only when all external dependencies have been met will the workflow and the payroll process continue on. Let's click the Show Critical Path button. Now we can see what jobs are on the critical path for this specific EMEA workflow. However, what about the critical path for our other geographical hubs? Unfortunately, this is one of the limitations we spoke about earlier. It's just not possible to see the entire critical path from this view. What we can do is look at the other workflows individually by going back to the master workflow, and then monitoring one of the other workflows. Now we can click the same Show Critical Path button to see the critical path for this specific workflow. So it's certainly possible to view the critical path for each workflow, just not all in one place. Let's go back to our EMEA workflow. We can see the workflow is almost to the external dependencies, and now it has reached them. As we can see here, the EMEA workflow is now waiting for the advertising processes in the other geographical areas to complete. Now we see the advertising process for Finland is complete, but the EMEA workflow is still waiting. Remember that all the advertising processes from all the geographical areas need to be completed before the payroll process will begin. Let's head over to AAI and see how this process looks over there. We're in the job stream definitions area and we have a filter set so we can easily find our job stream expenses. We click on the blue link and that takes us to additional details about the job stream. By default, we are on the Basic Information tab, which gives us information about the target job, what scheduler this job stream is running on, what business areas the job stream is attached to. Let's go to the Run Details tab. Here we have a filter set to show the last 21 days of executions and the next 12 hours of predicted executions. The executions with clocks next to the start date and end date and time indicate a predicted execution. Another way to tell this is by looking at the execution bar. Predicted executions will have a dotted line around the execution bar. We can find the currently running job stream by looking at the Now flag and seeing which execution bar it is bisecting. You'll notice that the start of the execution bar has a solid line indicating that the start time is now an actual start time, but the end part of the execution bar is still a dotted line. This is because the process hasn't yet completed and the end date and time is still a prediction. The small vertical purple line indicates the SLA we're trying to meet. Since the execution bar is green and the purple line is after the execution bar, this execution is predicted to meet the SLA. Let's click on the current execution to look at the Gantt view of the job stream. We can do this by either clicking on the blue link for the start date and time or by clicking on the execution bar directly. The status is displayed immediately at the top. This job stream is currently running and it is predicted to complete early. As the job stream progresses, this could change. On the left side, we see a list of all the jobs in the job stream. Our EMEA workflow is expanded. However, the other geographical workflows are not. We see our Now line showing us the process in the job stream that is currently running. Critical path jobs have a red folder icon next to their job name, so they are easily identifiable. That same job will be displayed with a red execution bar in the Gantt chart. We see some red lines between some of the execution bars. This indicates the critical path. Although the other geographical workflows are not expanded, we can already see something different here from what we saw in the Automic Automation web interface. This red line clearly shows a dependency on the critical path between one geographical area, France, and the main EMEA workflow. Remember that in Automic Automation we could not see this in one view. We had to view each workflow separately and click on the Show Critical Path button and manually correlate the critical path. If we expand the France workflow, it becomes even more clear on which specific job in this job stream is tied to the EMEA workflow. This job right here with a red folder icon and a red execution bar has a red line from the end to the start of one of the jobs in the EMEA workflow. Visually, this shows everything on one screen, which makes this much easier for the operators. Thank you for watching this quick training video on AAI and Automic Automation external dependencies.